Dutch Brazil, also known as New Holland, was the northern portion of Brazil, ruled by the Dutch during the Dutch colonization of the Americas between 1630 and 1654. The term New Holland should not be confused with the later term for present-day Western Australia. The main cities of the Nieuw Holland were the capital Mauritsstad, Frederikstadt, Natal, São Cristóvão, Fortaleza, Sirinhaém and Olinda. From 1630 onward, the Dutch Republic came to control almost half of Brazil's area at the time, with the capital in Recife. The Dutch West India Company set up the headquarters in Recife. The governor, Johan Maurits, invited artists and scientists to the colony to help promote Brazil and increase immigration. The Portuguese won a significant victory at the Second Battle of Guararapes in 1649. On the 26th of January 1654, the Dutch surrendered and signed the capitulation, but only as a provisory pact. By May 1654, the Dutch demanded that the Dutch Republic was to be given New Holland back. On the 6th of August 1661, New Holland was formally ceded to Portugal through the Treaty of The Hague. While of only transitional importance for the Dutch, this period was of considerable importance in the history of Brazil. Local Portuguese settlers had to oppose the Dutch largely by their own resources, and made use of the knowledge of local conditions. This struggle is counted in Brazilian historical memory as laying the seeds of Brazilian nationhood. The significance of Spain. The Low Countries had long been part of the Spanish Empire. However, in 1568 the 80 Years' War broke out, and the Dutch established the Republic of the Seven United Netherlands. A consequence of the war was the raiding of Spanish lands, colonies and ships by Dutch fleets. In 1594 the Spanish King Philip gave permission for Dutch ships bound for Brazil to sail together once a year in a fleet of 20 ships. In 1609, the two countries signed a 12-year truce in which the Dutch Republic was allowed to trade with Portuguese settlements in Brazil. Since Portugal was in a dynastic union with Spain from 1580 to 1640, the Dutch also agreed to delay the creation of a West India Company, a counterpart to the already existing Dutch East India Company. By the end of the truce, the Dutch had vastly expanded its trade networks, and gained over half of the carrying trade between Brazil and Europe. There were 29 sugar refineries in the northern Netherlands by 1622, versus 3 in 1595. In 1621, the 12-year peace treaty expired and the Dutch West Indian Company was immediately created. The Dutch-Portuguese War resumed, and through the new company, the Dutch now started to interfere with the Spanish and Portuguese colonies in America. In 1624, the Dutch sent a large expedition to invade Brazil. As part of the Groot de Zien plan, Admiral Jacob Wilkins in December 1623 led the West Indies Company to Salvador, which was then the capital of Brazil. They arrived there on May 8, 1624, on which Portuguese Governor Diogo Tristão de Mendonça Furtado surrendered to the Dutch. However, by April 30, 1625, the Portuguese recaptured the city with the help of a combined Spanish and Portuguese force. The city was to then play a critical role as a base of the Portuguese struggle against the Dutch for the control of Brazil. In 1628, the seizure of a Spanish silver convoy in Matanzas Bay provided the Dutch the funds for another attempt to conquer Brazil. Nieuw Holland. In the summer of 1629, the Dutch coveted a newfound interest in obtaining Pernambuco, a Brazilian state famous for its sugarcane. The Dutch fleet was led by Hendrik Cornelis Unlock. The weak gained control of Olinda by February 16, 1630, and Recife and Antonio Vaz by March 3. Machas de Albuquerque, the Portuguese governor, led a strong Portuguese resistance which hindered the Dutch from developing the forts on the lands which they had captured. By 1631, the Dutch left Olinda and tried to gain control of the fort of Cabedelo on Paraíba, the Rio Grande, Rio Formoso, and Cabo de Santo Agostinho. These attempts were also unsuccessful. However, still in control of Antonio Vaz and Recife, the Dutch later gained a foothold at Cabo de Santo Agostinho. By 1634, the Dutch controlled the coastline from the Rio Grande do Norte to Pernambuco's Cabo de Santo Agostinho. They still maintained control of the seas as well. By 1635, many Portuguese settlers were choosing Dutch-occupied land over Portuguese-controlled land. The Dutch offered freedom of worship and security of property. In 1635, the Dutch conquered 3 strongholds of the Portuguese, the towns of Porto Calvo, Arraial de Bom Jesus, and Fort Nazaré on Cabo de Santo Agostinho. These strongholds gave the Dutch increased sugar lands which led to an increase in profit. In 1637, the weak gave control of its Brazilian conquests, now called Nieuw Holland, to Johan Maurits van Nassau-Siegen, the great-nephew of William the Silent. Within the year, Johan Maurits captured the Brazilian province of Ceará and sent an expedition to capture the West African trading post of Elmina Castle, which became the capital of the Dutch Gold Coast. In 1641, the Dutch captured the province of Maranhão, meaning that Dutch control now extended across the entire coastline between the Amazon and São Francisco rivers. In 1640, the John VIII Duke of Braganza declared Portuguese independence from Spain, ending the 6-decade-long Iberian Union. As a result, the threat of further Spanish intervention against Dutch Brazil declined, since Brazil was originally a Portuguese colony. In 1641 to 1642, the new Portuguese regime concluded a truce with the Dutch, temporarily ending hostilities. In 1643, Johan Maurits equipped the expedition of Hendrik Brouwer that attempted to establish an outpost in southern Chile. In 1644, the weak recalled Johan Maurits to Europe in an attempt to cut military expenditures. Following the cessation of hostilities, Nieuw Holland under Johan Maurits van Nassau-Siegen government, Maurits claimed to have always loved Brazil due to its beauty and its people. He organized a form of representative local government by creating municipal councils and rural councils. Through these he began to modernize the country with streets, bridges, and roads in Recife, on the island of Antonio Vaz. He founded the town of Mauritsstad, where he created an astronomic observatory and a meteorological station, which were the first created by Europeans in the Americas. Under Maurits, protection for Brazilian Jews who had been formerly ostracized was increased. He allowed former Jews who had been forced to convert to Christianity to return to the former faith. Dutch Brazilians, and the Dutch settlers were divided into 2 separate groups, the first of which was known as Dienaren. Dienaren were soldiers, bureaucrats, and Calvinist ministers employed by the weak. Vrijburgers, Vrijleden, Vrijburgers, or Vrijluiden, were the second group of Dutch settlers, who were all the other Dutch settlers that did not fit into the category of Dienaren. The Vrijburgers were mostly ex-soldiers formerly employed by the weak but who then began to settle down. Others included Dutch who left the Netherlands to find a new life in Nieuw Holland. This group was the most economically important in Nieuw Holland since most trade was under the control. The end of Dutch Brazil. Dutch West India Company loses control. A year after Mauritsstad was summoned back by the Week Board, the Week faced a major uprising of Portuguese planters on June 1645. The Portuguese planters around Pernambuco had never fully accepted Dutch rule, and had also resented the high interest rates charged by Dutch moneylenders for loans to rebuild the plantations following the initial Dutch conquest. In August, the planters prevailed over Dutch forces in a minor battle fought outside Recife, effectively ending Dutch control over the colony. That year, the Portuguese gained Vatsaia, Sirinhaém, Pontal and Nazaré, the fort of Porto Calvo, and Fort Mauritsstad. By 1646, the Week only controlled 4 toeholds along the Brazilian coast, chief among them being Recife. In the spring of 1646, the Dutch sent a relief expedition to Recife consisting of 20 ships with 2,000 men, temporarily forestalling the fall of the city. Back in Europe, the collapse of Dutch Brazil accelerated Dutch efforts to end its long-standing conflict with Spain, the 80 Years' War. In August 1647, representatives from the Dutch province of Zeeland acquiesced to the Peace of Munster, ending the war with Spain. In return, Zeeland obtained promises from the other Dutch provinces to support a second, larger relief expedition to reconquer Brazil. The expedition, consisting of 41 ships with 6,000 men, set sail on December 26, 1647. In Brazil, the Dutch had already abandoned Itamaraca on December 13, 1647. The new expeditionary force arrived late at Recife, with many of its soldiers either dead or mutinous from lack of pay. On August 1649, the Portuguese routed the expeditionary force at the First Battle of Gararapes, fought outside Recife. On February 1649, the Portuguese again routed the Dutch at the Second Battle of Gararapes. The Dutch finally lost control of Recife on January 28, 1654, leaving to the Portuguese a colony of Brazil and putting an end to Nieuw Holland. Peace treaty. 7 years after the surrender of Recife, a peace treaty was organized between the Dutch Republic and Portugal. The Treaty of The Hague was signed on August 6, 1661, and it demanded that the Portuguese would pay 4 million reais over the span of 16 years in order to help the Dutch recover from the loss of Brazil.